My name's Keeble. Forest County, Potawatomi. I'm a senior here. I'll be graduating this semester, hopefully. Yeah, before I came here, I was texting my sister and I was telling her because tonight's her last basketball game, and I usually make effort to go see every one of her basketball games, that she has, and and I told her what I was doing, and she was fine with that. But when I was in my addiction, she, it was nothing like that. I had no relationships with anybody in my family when I was drinking and doing drugs. But I was born and raised most of my life on Potawatomi Reservation up in Carter, and alcoholic family. I was physically abused growing up, and mentally, whatever kind of abuse. I was never sexually abused, but but the thing was is that it wasn't always like what happened to me that makes me drink. It's the way I react to it when it does happen to me, because I don't react normal to normal situations. I'm a very selfish, controlling person, and I think very highly of myself. But
yeah, you do.
Yes,
it's good. It's good.
But my parents sobered up when I was 9 years old. I seen my dad go in and outside of jail. His routine was, when he got in trouble, he would try to go to jail during the winter so he could sit out during the winter, so he's out during the summer. And I seen my dad go to multiple treatment centers growing up. And I remember growing up, I remember telling myself, I'm never going to be like that. I'm never going to drink, I'm never going to get high, I'm never going to be like that. I felt like I was going to do it. I'm going to be somebody, I'm going to be the first one to graduate in my family, I'm going to, I want to be a good example for my community, and that didn't work out. I remember one day, I was just out with my friends, and I thought my parents were just nagging me, always telling me to quit hanging out with those kids, quit hanging out with them, and I thought they were just being mean, because in my head, the people that they were kind of telling me to go hang out with were, non-natives, and it wasn't really that, it was just, the people I was hanging out with weren't up to any good. And I remember I got high for the first time, and I remember it just took me away from everything. Made me forget about the home life, made me forget about school, made me forget about the girlfriend, made me forget about the rejections, all the worries. And when I got high, everything kind of simmered down, and I was able to relax, and so that was my first love. I loved getting high all the time. I tried getting high each time I could, but as a kid, I don't have the money, I didn't have the resources, but eventually I'd find all that. And I was a good kid in school at this time. I was involved in all the sports. I was a real good football player, and all this and that. And, I was getting good grades. And then, eventually over time, over the years, everything started slipping. The grades, hanging out with people, the right people. The people that would push me to be a better person. And I was hanging out with the people that would drink all the time, get high and whatnot. And I fell into that. And, I remember I used to love to party when I was in high school, because people liked me when I was drunk. I was able to relax, I can be who that person wanted me to be, because, a lot of factors go into that. I grew up being, getting beat up because I was an Indian. Getting, called this because I'm an Indian, which I had, at first I was just like, what's wrong with me? Why are they beating me up? So I dealt with a lot of that. So when I'd get drunk, I was able to escape that. And, who do you want me to be? You want me to be friendly? I could be friendly. You want me to act like a gangster? I could act like a gangster. I could be all these things that, the group of people I was around wanted me to be. Everything but myself. So, the parents are getting after me still and, grounding me all the time, trying to do everything in their willpower to stop me from this behavior. And for me, it was just like, I'm young, I'm supposed to be doing this, I'm supposed to be having fun, I'm supposed to be sneaking out, stealing my parents' cars, you know, stealing their money, doing all this and that, you know. But when it came to like, you know, by the time I was 17, I had all the windows in the house were nailed shut. You know, the keys were right next to my parents when they were sleeping, and they just kept tracking me all the time. And you know, and I remember before 18, my parents really tried to get me help. You know, they sent me to a mental institution, and they sent me to a treatment center a couple months after because, you know, I just wasn't listening. And then finally, I convinced them to move in with my grandma. Now, my grandma, most lovely person I've ever met. Perfect role model for me, but she was also the perfect enabler for me, you know, and she kind of let me do anything, you know, and but you know, she was just my next victim in my eyes, you know. It was just like, you know, I lived with her for the next 3 years, and you know, she protected me. She hid things that I did wrong. You know, when I'd get arrested, she wouldn't tell my parents, you know, because she knew that we would start fighting, you know. And I remember when I got my first drinking and driving, I was 17, and you know, we kept it away from my parents until I turned 18. You know, and I remember I'd show up to court, you know, crying, acting like I'm so sorry, and I'd get right out and I'd be getting drunk right after that, you know, and then, you know, I'd always think that certain things would take that away, you know, going to school. You know, I tried going to several tech schools just to try to get in order, but eventually, you know, drinking, and I was too hungover the next morning to go to class, or I was too high to go to class, and you know, things were just piling up. And you know, again, you know, I'd go through a cycle every year or two, you know, same cycle. You know, get drunk, go to school, quit school, get in trouble, go to jail. All right, I'm gonna get my life together, you know, because I detoxed in jail. You know, and you know, towards the end of my drinking, I was like, please send me to jail so I can detox, because I couldn't detox on my own. I couldn't stop on my own. So when I'm in jail, you know, and I'm sitting on that jail cell, you know, I was able to sweat it out, do whatever I had to do. When I get out, I was, you know, I was ready. I was like starting over again, and it only lasts a couple hours, you know, and you know, and the lies were just piling up. You know, I just lie my ass off all the time. You know, to my parents, about everything, you know, and you know, my grandma passed away, and then, you know, and I felt bad for that because, you know, my grandma's kind of somewhat, you know, old age, old memory. So I was starting to take advantage of that. You know, I'd borrow money from her and I'd be like, oh, I paid you back. You're just getting old, Grandma. And I never paid her back. You know, so I was starting to feel guilty when she passed away. That was, you know, I never knew how to deal with stuff. You know, so my way of dealing was getting high, you know, drinking, doing a couple lines, taking a couple pills, you know, whatever I could do, I was going to do, you know, and, you know, and I kept getting in trouble, you know, and everything just kept progressing. I kept going to jail more. The jail times were starting to get longer and longer and longer, and I remember one time I went to my lawyer. He was like, you need help. He was like, I'm seeing you like all the time, and they all have to revolve around drugs or alcohol. None of them are for speeding or none of this. He was like, they all revolve around drugs and alcohol. And it's funny, I used to always get pulled over with drugs or get in trouble with drugs or something like that. And I thought I was, I used to deal drugs. I used to think I was Scarface, you know, on my reservation. But what kind of drug dealer gets busted all the time, you know? So, you know, that was all in my head. You know, again, you know, I think very highly of myself. I think how people view me. You know, and at this, my life was shitty. You know, I thought I was living the life, but my life was shitty. You know, my parents didn't let me around my brothers or sisters. They didn't allow me at the house. I only lived 4 houses down from my parents. And I couldn't see them. You know, they wouldn't allow that stuff around my brothers or sisters. So, you know, I remember this. This is kind of like everything started revolving around it. You know, if I was happy, celebrate, go get drunk or high. You know, if I was feeling bad about something, get drunk or high. You know, just everything was revolving around it. And You know, and then one day I was already in trouble with the law, and I finally got busted. And I was going to court for 7 felonies and a whole bunch of misdemeanors. And I was just like, I kind of panicked, but it still wasn't good enough to quit drinking or do anything. You know, and I remember one day, you know, this was right around when I stopped, because I'd always try to stop all the time, you know, but I couldn't. I just didn't know why I couldn't. You know, I just kept drinking, and, you know, sometimes I'd just be sitting there drinking, like, how the hell did I end up here? Well, one day, you know, I was downstairs, I was at my house getting high, and my sister comes knocking on the door. And at this time, you know, again, they weren't allowed by me. They'd get in trouble if they were seen by me. You know, and I remember my sister was knocking on the door, and she just wanted to come and see me. I haven't seen her in a long time. And I remember, you know, I was kind of peeking around the door like that, and, you know, kind of just like, yeah, what do you want? You know, because, you know, the house was just, you know, there's beer, there's drugs laying all over, and she just wanted to come see me. And I told her, no, you can't, you know, because, you know, I just told her a lie, you know. I'm busy, I got to do something. And then, you know, right when I was going to shut the door, she kind of put her foot in the door. And, you know, she was only 7 years old at the time. And, you know, she asked me, she's like, don't you love me? And then, you know, I'm sitting there, and then, you know, all I did was slam the door. And, you know, on her birthday, on Christmas, you know, I'd buy her stuff. But, you know, all she did was want me to be there. You know, and I remember I walked in the house, and I just cried. And cried and cried and cried. And I remember, first thing I went and did is grab a bottle out of the freezer, and I'm just like, why can't I stop? Why am I still drinking? Why is my life like this? You know, so, you know, I just kept drinking, and, you know, I remember I fell on my knees, and I just asked for help. You know, I was just like, you know, either take me or help me. You know, I was just tired of dying, I guess. You know, and I remember when I asked for help, you know, you kind of look at stuff, and, you know, for me, you know, I could see my Creator starting to open up my eyes, you know, because, you know, I was always the person to do foxhole prayers, you know. If you get me through this, I promise I'll stop. If you get me through this, I promise I'll stop. You know, and I remember my cousin was pregnant, and she's like my sister. I was like, if you keep me alive till this kid's born, I promise I'll go get help. You know, for me, it was just like, all right, I got like a month of partying left. You know, but, you know, 6 hours later, you know, I get a phone call, and, you know, she had her baby, you know, a month early. And, you know, I kind of freaked out, you know. For me, you know, I was crazy at the time, too. Don't get me wrong. I was in the right frame of mind. I thought God was saying, you're going to die soon. You know, so, you know, I went up and seen her, and I held my niece, and I looked at her, and I was just like, I'm not going to be here for her. You know, if I am part of her life, it's just going to be filled with empty promises. And, you know, I kind of walked out of there, and in my head I was like, I need to get help, I need to get help. And I called up this treatment center in Minnesota, and I'm like, I need help. And the lady was like, well, you know, we got a couple days. We have no beds open right now, but, you know, if you can wait out 2 days, 2-3 days, you know, we'll have a space over. And I just looked at her, and I'm like, look, lady, I'm like, I'm going to die if I don't get help soon. I'm like, you don't understand. I'm not going to want this in a couple days. You give me a couple hours, I'm going to be out there drinking, and it's going to just, all this is going to be gone. And then she was like, well, if you can get here tomorrow morning, we'll find a spot for you. So, you know, I knocked on my parents' door. I went home. And, you know, my parents were kind of like, what do you want? You know, usually it's for money, or, you know, you got a good number to a lawyer, you know, or something like that. And, you know, I told them, I'm going to go to treatment, I'm going to get help. You know, I thought they were going to be, oh, you know, no, you'll be all right. Just say they're like, kind of like, thank God, you know, he's going to go get help, you know. And my dad offered me this, you know, offered me Alcoholics Anonymous. you know, he was like, I know this program that can help you get sober. You don't have to go to treatment. But I was like, I need to get the hell out of here, you know. And then I was just like, come pick me up tomorrow morning. We'll head out. You know, and in the meantime, up there, I'm calling all my friends. Like, there's be a big party at my house. I'm going away. You know, I'm fronting all these drugs, and you know, I'm telling them grab bottles, come to my house. You know, I'm going to treatment tomorrow. And you know, my dad basically said, pack your shit. We're leaving in an hour. So, because he knew what I was doing. My dad was in that position before, you know, and so I went home, and of course, like a good drug addict I was, you know, I'm stuffing pills in my socks and everything, and whatever I could find, I was stuffing, and you know, so we stayed overnight in Minnesota, and you know, of course, you know, I'm outside, you know, I forgot something, I'm out there getting high, and I remember the next morning when my dad drove me to the treatment center, and I was about to get out, and you know, I kind of hesitated before I stepped out of the car, and he was just like, do me one favor. He was just like, whatever they tell you, just please do it. You know, he was like, they're going to tear you down, they're going to tell you what's wrong with you, how bad of a person you are, and things that you have done has hurt your family and people around you. He was like, just sit there and listen and ask for help. And that was probably the best suggestion that I've ever gotten, because I went to that treatment center, and you know, it was a shitty feeling, but I was starting to let things go, but I was becoming aware of all the people I hurt in my life, you know, all the women I hurt, you know, my family, my brothers not being there, you know, my sister, not even knowing my sister, you know, I barely knew my sister, you know, and, you know, then they were just like, you're one sick guy, you know, you need to go to another treatment center after this. So, you know, they were like, we're going to send you down to Florida. And I'm like, all right, let's do this. And so they sent me down to Boca Raton, Florida, to another treatment center. And it was a 5-month treatment center. And, you know, there they encouraged me. They took me to meetings every day. And it was basically, they were teaching me how to live again. You know, get a job, make it bad, you know, be responsible, be accountable for your actions. I did all that. But during that time, you know, just talking with my mom, you know, and having these conversations with my sister and my brothers over the time, and, you know, one of the hardest things I found out in there is my mom was just like, do you know how, she asked me, am I a bad mom? And I was just like, I'm like, no, why would you think that? She was just like, you know, I think I raised you wrong because of the things you did, you know, and I never realized my actions make my parents feel like, however. You know, she was just like, you know how long I just prayed? You know how hard it is to give your son up to God and just hope that he won't die? And she was just like, I used to pray every night, you know, God, please help me, please help me, please help him. You know, she was like, I could not do anything for you. She's like, you know how it feels to be a mother and not being able to help her own son? And she was like, you made me feel like a bad mom for a long time. And she was like, one thing, I hated your stereo system in the car, but at the other time, you know, I'm happy that you had it, because when you pull in like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, she's like, I knew you were safe. She's like, I was always afraid for that phone call in the middle of the night saying you was in jail, you were dead, you were in the hospital. You know, she was like, those were my nights. And, you know, that's hard to hear from a mom, you know, and still, you know, that keeps me motivated today, you know, to stay sober. So I decided to stay down in Florida, you know, and live down. I went to school. I was on Dean's list, you know, and I stayed sober. I was always, you know, do the right things, you know, right things will happen to you. Just simple things. Do good things will happen. You know, but life does happen. People die, you know, things happen, you know. And I was learning how to react to certain things. And then finally I was probably like 3 years sober, and I get a phone call. And it's my lawyer, and I was just like, oh, geez, you know. And so I came back up to Wisconsin for my court case. And, you know, I flew back and forth for like a year, and finally I went and sat in front of the judge, and we had a plea agreement here, and we're just hoping the judge would accept it. You know, and, you know, I sat there, and I was I'm like, I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to go to jail. I turned my life around. But one of the main things that has helped me is that, I surrounded myself with good people that encourage me to do good in life. Other sober people in my life to push me to be sober. And they just told me, as long as you're being of service, your Creator will take care of you. So that was the only thing I was holding on to. I hope he's telling the truth, but I'm trying. I'm trying to do God's work, whatever God's work is. I'm still trying to figure that out. But all I know is I'm helping other people. I went to treatment centers and helped people there. I was doing sweat lodges out at prisons. I was going out to prisons, just helping people. I was doing a lot of volunteer work. Because that, for me, that's when I can feel my Creator in my life, is when I'm giving myself to somebody else. So, I went to court, and, I had a pile of court work, and I had a pile of recommendation letters, from numerous people down in Florida. From the warden in the prison, 2 prisons I helped out, they wrote me letters. From the numerous treatment centers that I go help out their patients, they've written letters. And the judge just kind of looked at me and was like, I can't send somebody like you to prison. And he was just like, I'll give you a month to come back to Green Bay. He was like, get your stuff in order down in Florida and come back. He was like, because I don't want to give you no felonies. I don't want to do any of this, because he was like, I've only seen one other person come in my courtroom and change their life like you did. You stayed out of trouble for 5 whole years and never showed your face in this courtroom. He was like, that's almost unheard of, and he was like, you complete 2 years of probation up here, and he was like, I'll drop all your felonies to misdemeanors. So I'm just like, all right, I can't pass that up. But on the other hand, I was just like, do I want to come back? I almost thought about not coming back, and but I ended up moving back, and I remember calling up all the universities trying to get in, and I didn't really care where I was going. But the only reason why I'm here is because this university didn't have a pre-requirement of a secondary language. They're like, no, you don't need Spanish or anything. I'm like, all right, I'll come to Green Bay then. And so I have a hard enough problem with English. You think I'm going to learn Spanish? So, and Spanish in college trips me out because they can't talk English or something in class. And I don't know about that. And so I ended up coming here, not knowing anybody, not knowing anything, but the things that I learned down in Florida, I was just applying here. And the nice thing was I was close to my family, and I was able to see my family more. And the nice thing about it was that when I lived down in Florida, my sister knew I loved her. I'd tell my sister every night on the phone that I loved her, and she knew it. I lived 4 houses down from her when I was in my drug and drinking abuse. She didn't know if I loved her or not. So, and I'm up here, and, life is happening. Life is good for me. I have my struggles with myself, and, I get to spend time with my family. Me and my dad and my brothers do this motorcycle ride every year. They didn't even trust me on a motorcycle when I was drinking or using. Well, they probably don't even trust me on a motorcycle when I'm not today. They have some nicknames for me for being on a motorcycle. And, I'm allowed to stay at their house. My sister's allowed to stay down here with me. When I first moved down here after a year, one of my younger brothers lived with me for a couple of years. That stuff, is amazing to me. It's not a big accomplishment, but for me, just to have those relationships again are very important to me, because they were lost, they weren't there, and we can joke around about it today. Yeah, it's a big deal, and, I did a lot of shitty stuff when I was out there to everybody, but I make amends to people. I've said I was sorry, and today, just by staying sober and doing good things and trying to be there for people, that's my way of trying to give back and everything. So, and that probably sums it up, basically. So, does anybody got any questions?
What are your nicknames on a motorcycle?
You guys ever watch, what's that one, You ever hear of Dudley? No. Yeah. You gotta watch him. Yeah.
How much longer you got in school?
I'm graduating this May, I think. Pretty sure.
So what's your major?
First Nation Studies. Yeah. Then I plan on going social work down in Milwaukee. So.
How come Milwaukee?
Huh?
You got a pistol?
I heard it's got a good school.
Three of them that have done that.
What do you do with social work? What do you do?
I go out to South Dakota every year during winter months, and I do a big clothing and food drive out there, and it's grown pretty big over the past couple of years. And you know, just going out there, you see all the problems that are out there, and they can't afford services like that. So because I'm well off financially, that I want to get my social work degree and then go out there and offer my certificate out there so I can help any way I can. You know I can help without the degree, but you know, we need that piece of paper to say that we know what we're doing. So.